Hey, Southern Nevada. Whenever I'm in a bar or restaurant, I always order tap water and usually get the joke, "You mean Lake Mead's finest?" Well, did you know it's actually sourced from the Rocky Mountains? And despite its hard, mineral rich taste, your water meets safety standards and keeps you healthy, so don't twist up hard water with its quality. It's tested 300,000 times, ensuring your tap water meets or surpasses the highest quality standards. You got a lot on your plate. SNWA is taking care of what's in your glass. So learn simple ways to enhance the taste at snwa.com. SNWA is a not-for-profit water agency. You know, no one wants to see their power bills go up, but a little extra hate is in the air this month, not only because another rate hike is up for consideration, but it's coming on the heels of scandalous headlines involving Nevada energy. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with the Nevada Conservation League's Camalot Todd and Battleborn Progress's Jacob Solis to give us an overview of why consumers are more frustrated than ever with NV Energy and whether this time around concerns will be addressed or overlooked. It's Tuesday, September 9th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Before we get underway, we want to point out that CityCast Las Vegas reached out multiple times over many months to the media relations manager for NV Energy to either come on our podcast or arrange for an interview with someone from the company, with no response back. So, Jacob, I want to start with you. Why is Nevada Energy the only option for power for most Las Vegas residents?
Well, this actually there's a historical reason for this, and it's most energy utility companies are monopolies just by virtue of how expensive energy is to deliver in most places. So, I mean, going back literally over 100 years, this is the case all over the country. Now, for Nevada, NV Energy goes back to, I believe, before Nevada was even a state, though NV Energy itself is a merger of several energy utilities that covered sort of like Southern Nevada, Northern Nevada, and rural Nevada. I believe it was three companies. Now it's one company, and the company is owned by Berkshire Hathaway. So the short answer is why NV Energy? Well, there was the merger. The long answer is, frankly, economies of scale means that like building power plants, building transmission lines, getting power from the middle of the desert to Las Vegas, that's all extraordinarily expensive. And frankly, in most places, it's extraordinarily expensive.
Interesting. So I understand there's some oversight within the state. And Camelot, maybe you could give us a little understanding of how that works. So, I mean, what is the PUCN and how do they oversee NV Energy, and are there limitations to that oversight?
Yeah. So the PUCN, Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, is a quasi-judicial oversight. So they regulate some rules that are made at the legislative standard, and then they kind of enforce it with fines or through kind of cases or workshops, right? There are limitations to what they can do. So it is almost a hybrid between what legislators do and the laws they pass, and then what the PUCN can do. And it's evolved and kind of gone back and forth over time.
Now, they also have open meetings, and they are subject to some manner of receipt of public comment. But I understand that there is a controversy right now as to whether or not public comment will be allowed before a new proposed rate hike is considered this month. So what's that all about, either one of you?
So there is annually a thing called a general consumer session where if either NV Energy or Southwest Gas, because both utilities are managed by the PUCN, want to do something, they put proposals before the PUCN, and then before those proposals go through, there's this general consumer session where regular people can be like, I think this is a bad idea for XYZ reason. Of course, at other meetings, you could go to the PUC and there's public comment, but that requires a level of effort that is, frankly, most consumers don't realize that's happening. I digress, though, because that was supposed to happen the Monday right after the state got hacked. So as you may recall, all state offices were closed. That included the PUCN consumer session. And so it just didn't happen. Now, we're in this sort of limbo where it is not entirely clear when when the consumer session is going to get rescheduled, and if it gets rescheduled after the PUC votes for the rate hike that NV Energy wants.
So if consumers don't get the opportunity to address the PUCN before decision making, how can consumers like us affect their decisions about rate hikes? I mean, what options are remaining?
Well, usually I would say you can write letters to the PUCN, but you can't because of the cyber attack. The PUCN system is still down. So there's really no avenue outside of the media and social media to express your emotions and your feelings to the PUCN before the potential decisions made.
So, how valuable is the public comment really versus, I don't know, independent audits from trusted sources or like enforcement of their own regulations to see if whatever's being proposed jives with, the regulatory structure that is in place?
Well, any regulatory agency is going to have to deal with something called regulatory capture. This idea that, like, the industry that they're regulating, they deal with them all the time. Regulators are people, people who run industry are people. They build relationships, they talk to each other all the time. And so there's like a blurring of the lines between what regulations do and don't make sense based on who regulators are interacting with all the time. Obviously, some regulators are more dogged than others, some are more captured than others. But this is a sort of generally accepted notion of like what happens to regulatory bodies, all not just in Nevada, everywhere, in every body over all time. When we talk about
Well,
public
but
scrutiny,
haven't you gotten the memo that all regulation is bad and that it interferes with free enterprise and that we're all suffering because there's too much regulation? Haven't you heard that?
Oh yeah. Well, see, this is the thing. This is where the public input comes in, because what matters is finding the balance to regulations that actually help and don't hurt, right? Because if the regulations do make power more expensive, then that hurts the consumer too. And so for in this very specific instance, they're asking, say, for 9% increases. Now, the question is 9% reasonable? Why do they want 9%? In this specific instance, I believe, if someone can, Camelot can correct me if I'm wrong, it's to build more natural gas plants.
It's a little bit more complicated. So, more natural gas plants, but the reason they want to build natural gas plants is to increase return for their shareholders by about $250 million. So, we can get into like how they profit off of building natural gas plants, but it's really so their shareholders get the money.
Okay, I guess the one thing that we are not mentioning yet, now I'm glad it has come out, is that Nevada Energy is beholden not just to the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, but to their shareholders. And Berkshire Hathaway is a big, big company that, is supposed to pay dividends and people invest. But they're not going to come before the PUCN and say, because we need to pay our people better, our investors better. They're going to say that it's for benefit of the community, right? So what's their elevator pitch to the community on how this helps hiking up 9%? I mean, I'm asking you guys to speak on behalf of Berkshire Hathaway.
Well, we can say just historically, NV Energy has complained about the volatility of the natural gas market, and to some extent, just the volatility of energy generation. I'm sure everyone has seen when NV Energy says, stop using high energy appliances during peak times during the summer, right? If it's 115 degrees outside, please do not wash your clothes when it is 115 degrees outside.
Right.
And the worry of sort of persistent blackouts or rolling blackouts could happen because the grid can't keep up with demand during these sort of dangerous times is the concern for more power generation. And certainly that's not a concern. We've seen what happens in Texas, for instance, which are on their own grid. What happens when you don't have the energy generation required for peak power usage? All of that said, you're right. They're a private company owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And I think there's a genuine question, and for the record, has been a genuine question for decades about whether or not the private concern of stockholders lines up with the public concern of people who need power to live, especially in Nevada, especially in Las Vegas, where the heat is literally deadly. And so we've seen there's really only one case of this, the Tennessee Valley Authority, where the federal government stepped in and created a power company because private power companies were going to gouge the residents of what was then one of the poorest regions in the country. And the TVA, for all the controversy it generated, people can go to the Wikipedia page and find out more if they want. It transformed the entire region of Tennessee and the states around there. So there is precedent for genuine public oversight of power utilities in particular benefiting entire regions. And the flip side of that is now we have the energy utility here. I mean, pretty directly wanting to build these massive, expensive projects, have Nevada residents foot the bill so that they can deliver more for their shareholders.
And I do want to add one, because they're a regulated monopoly, they're guaranteed a profit no matter what, right? So NV Energy is always going to turn a profit no matter what. They don't have competition. And they have, in that rate case, right? 9% rate case increase for us is one thing. But if you dig into the docket, you'll see that they also are having us, me, you, David, Jacob, pay for limo services, really expensive, liquor bills at the bar, luxury hotels for Berkshire Hathaway executives. So to a degree,
I mean, and that is scandal number one that I want to talk about, the spending patterns of NV Energy, I guess, executives. So how did that happen? And kind of, I don't know, I understand Southwest Gas, another energy provider in our community, also kind of got caught up in this kind of scandal.
Yeah, so when we pay our energy bill, it's never broken down into we're paying 3% or like 3 cents for, repairs to power lines. It's not a very clear breakdown of what we're paying for. We just pay it, right? We look at the bill and we're like, okay, at the end of the month, we owe NV Energy $115, right? In that $115, it's yes, the energy we use, but it is also business expenses that they can write off or have tried to write off before, right? There's advertising and lobbying expenses that they've tried to write off as well. But if there's not oversight, right, if the public doesn't know that we're paying for that, and the PUCN is trusting that these utility monopolies are acting in good faith, which they might not be, it's up to consumer protection agencies to really flag and question, hey, are we sure that we should be, trusting these people who have a history of doing that? And how do we make this a more transparent and accountable system for the public?
The hottest night of the year is back. AFAN's 39th annual Black and White Party taking over Chaos Nightclub inside the Palms Casino Resort on Saturday, September 20th. This year's Wild West themed celebration is hosted by Frederick Godinez and Alexander Stabler of the design studio Frederick Alexander, and it's your chance to experience an unforgettable night of fashion, entertainment, and community. The entertainment for the evening is stacked. Simone and Mirage from RuPaul's Drag Race, Fantasy, David Hernandez and Kyle Koo from American Idol, the cast of Piranha and Gypsy nightclubs, the Chippendales, and more. Proceeds support Aid for AIDS of Nevada's critical programs, providing housing, transportation, food, and medical case management for those living with or affected by HIV/AIDS. Visit afanlv.org to learn more and purchase your tickets today. That's afanlv.org.
Hey y'all, it's executive producer Sonia Cho Swanson here. And I was never really much of a smoothie or a meals on the go kind of person. And then I became a mom. So now between daycare drop-offs, swim classes, doctor's appointments, and working full-time, Huel Black Edition is exactly the kind of boost my morning needs. I got the Black Edition Vanilla, so yummy, and it's a complete meal with 40 grams of plant-based protein and 27 vitamins and nutrients that keep me full and ready to tackle my day. There's no added sugar, it's gluten-free, and super easy to shake up and take on the go. And hey, they just dropped something totally new. Huel Daily Greens Ready to Drink, a sparkling canned beverage that comes in flavors like blueberry, apple, and peach, with 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods, and just 25 calories. So try Huel with 15% off for new customers today using our code LASVEGAS at Huel.com/Las Vegas. Fuel your best performance with Huel today.
I'm going to move to scandal number 2 because I think it's the much bigger one, although they're both kind of interesting in this time. But I think the most eye-catching one was the overcharging for decades involving tens of thousands of consumers and millions of dollars. Who wants to tell me about that?
Yeah, so I can jump in on that. So I think it was, oh no, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was something like $17 million, right? Over like since 2002. It's several decades. They've overcharged $17 million, thousands of customers, and they have paid back a pittance of it. The PUCN did like, it's like a two-tier investigation. So they did an initial review of the evidence just to see what was there. They found since 2017 a sort of precise number of people who had been overcharged and how many of those people had been paid back a little bit, not in full, just a little bit by NV Energy. And then that prompted a fuller investigation that is ongoing by the PUCN, because to some extent, the reason this only goes back to 2017 and they think it goes back to 2002 is because they only have detailed records going back to 2017. So they know for a fact there were people who were overcharged, but they have no idea how many, and they have no idea for how much.
Camalot, how did this happen and how did it go so long without notice?
Right. That's
To
the
your
big question.
understanding, I understand the investigation still going on, but what is your group kind of honed in on?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, right? Is how did this happen and why did it take so long for it to be discovered? To kind of give you some back history, right? Earlier in January, there was a few consumer reports that KT&V picked up on of people getting a notice in the mail saying, hey, you've been overcharged thousands of dollars, but we're only going to give you back $200. If you lived in a multifamily home, like a townhouse or like a condo or an apartment, right? And people were like, excuse me? So they went to the PUCN and they were like, hey, I'm filing, a report, what's going on here.
Yeah.
And then they went to the public. At the same time, all of this was happening, right? NCL was working on getting a bill called field cost sharing passed through the state legislation. And in there was a really tiny line that said utility monopolies must pay back the full amount that they overcharged.
That sounds very common sense. And NCL just is your
Yeah.
organization,
Yeah.
Nevada Conservation League. Okay.
Yeah, we thought it was a reasonable ad. Oh, if I'm overcharged for something, you go back. That's a pretty standard thing. And as we were going through, we realized that NV Energy was really fighting us, tooth and nail for this really common sense, bipartisan supported bill. Then we get a call. I was actually on a different call. I got a call essentially saying, hey, Cam, we found out that NV Energy has overcharged tens of thousands of Nevadans for 20 years for $17 million. And it was through the Consumer Bureau, which testified in support of our bill, that kind of flagged this. So there was a whole lot kind of happening all at once. Eventually, NV Energy realized it was a lost cause to fight us on that bill. And then it came to our attention that the reason they only paid back a fraction of what they overcharged was because they applied the wrong regulatory statute to those overcharges. So they were being shady all over on so many different levels.
Well, let's just say their math didn't math out.
Their math didn't math out. And to a degree, I think they did know that they were using the wrong rule for the overcharges, right? I think that's they're smart.
Spicy allegation. Fair to throw out, and I would hope NV Energy has a response to that.
Well, we can at least say this, though, which is that for a private utility that operates as a monopoly and is guaranteed a profit, there should be some expectation that they're regulated with the expectation that they're operating in good faith for their consumers who have no choice, who are not operating in a normal market where they could just simply go get their power somewhere else. Now, when NV Energy does something like this, where they choose the statute to comply by the letter of the law that allows them to pay the least money back for their own malfeasance, in this case, overcharging customers for literally 2 decades, that should draw some level of scrutiny. Why should NV Energy be allowed to do that, to pick and choose what regulatory schemes they can use in order to pay the least amount of money back for their own mistakes?
Okay, counsel. But in fairness to Berkshire Hathaway, you even said that this goes back to '02, well before they came into the game. I'm wondering, when they did come in, did things change in a way for the better or for the worse on this topic? Or
They merged in 2008, I believe. That's when it operated under NV Energy as the brand, right? So that was probably about 6 years into, where they think the overcharge happened, right? But it only goes back to 2017. That's still a good chunk of years that they've had this information. And they were the ones who caught it and sent it out to consumers, right? So
Mm.
they were the ones who said, hey, Joe Schmo in that townhouse, by the way, we've been overcharging you thousands of dollars, right? For, X, Y
But
years.
then we're just going to give you back the fraction, and that got the ball rolling. Let me ask this last question on this topic, and then I just want to move on real quickly. How can someone find out easily if they've been overcharged at any point? Is there a way
There is
right
not.
now?
There's no, no, there's not. Again, like the best way to do that would be to call the PUCN. And you can't do that because the state websites are down and we don't know when that's going to be up.
But
Um,
even if they were up, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of
there's
optimism in your voice that they're going to be able to pinpoint if, I was in an apartment in 2006, if I might have paid too much for my power bill.
There is not. NV Energy is supposed to, in mid-September, submit to the PUCN their explanation of how these overcharges happened. I can pull up the exact date, right?
And there might be a list of names or properties or something like that.
So, no. So, NV Energy gets to submit their comments by September 18th on why they think these overcharges happened, right? They can, if they're feeling really warm, fuzzy towards consumers, give a outline of how they think consumers can contact them to see if they've been overcharged. But that's a if they want to, not a requirement.
So I guess now there's a bigger question, right? This rate hike is coming through. There's these scandals, but they're saying, look, we have expenses, whether you like them or not, we find them to be important. Should any costs for utilities be passed on to consumers like any sandwich shop or car dealership does? I mean, they make a profit and they pass the cost on.
I'll start with this, and that power utilities do operate in a weird space, right? We can acknowledge that running a power utility is expensive, and they have a lot of expenses that are, frankly, they don't exist for other kinds of companies, right? One in particular is stuff like wildfire insurance. I think today there was the DOJ is suing one of California's power utilities over their role in causing a wildfire. And so fire insurance is one of these issues where it's like, should the public have to pay for power utilities to increase their fire insurance is a genuine question that deserves debate, because I'm not sure that that has an easy answer. That said, these power utilities also demand the scrutiny, like I said earlier, because there is no other course. Like there's nowhere else to go. And so if they're going to pass these costs onto the consumer, then the consumer deserves to know why and whether it's worth it. And if we're going to make this sort of like corporate analogy for power utilities, they are beholden to public input just as much as they're beholden to shareholder input, right? To some extent, the public acts, I mean, not really because they're not literally shareholders, but like they act with the power of a shareholder in theory, quote unquote, you get what I'm saying? Like the public
We're not
ought to have
shareholders in the paper trail sense. We're
No,
shareholders in the we're all in this together sense.
exactly, in the metaphorical sense,
We're stakeholders. Maybe better.
Yeah,
Shareholders versus stakeholders. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, we hold stakes, darn it. And so if we're holding all the stakes here and give them all the money, then they should be able to justify to us, the stakeholders, that this is worth it, right? Because sure, investments matter, but like, what are the investments? Are we paying for quote unquote business expenses / limousines?
Yeah. And we should certainly do that before the rate hike goes into effect.
Right.
Just saying.
Yes.
That
Just
would be
saying.
great. I would love that.
Both of you work for organizations with a mission to aid consumers, protect people, especially from, actions of big companies and even the government. So, what changes would your organizations like to see that could protect or benefit energy consumers over what we have as the status quo?
Yeah, I can go first. One, I think stronger ratepayer protection regulations would be ideal, right? So when we pay our energy bill, we should know exactly what we're paying for. We should know if we're paying for new power plants or if we're paying for limo rides for Berkshire Hathaway executives or if we're just paying for the energy that we use. I think ensuring that there's some kind of clarity in the billing process is a first step that could be really easy to achieve. The other thing is we are a state that has almost 365 days of sunshine, right? Relying on the natural affordable energy that we have in our backyard and ensuring that it's more accessible to people who live in apartment complexes and townhomes and businesses. So that way our grid isn't 60% methane gas that's very unstable price wise and also isn't from Nevada, but is a little bit more affordable for Nevadans to use and is local clean energy. So I think those are two really easy ways in which we can kind of shift the balance. And obviously, I think transparency and accountability and ensuring that the public is more involved in the things that happen at the PUCN, right? So making sure general consumer sessions don't get canceled and making sure there's some clarity in how they can navigate whether or not they've been overcharged. I think those are all really easy steps in the right direction. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think you took the words right out of my mouth because I think transparency and accountability are the first steps towards making sure that any public utility that's privately owned. But beyond that, I think it also goes to what is the purpose of an energy utility? And, is it to maximize value for the shareholders? And frankly, I do not think that that should be like just speaking generally, the case. It should start with what is best for the consumer. And so there needs to be that accountability piece. Is the PUCN doing its job to make sure that NV Energy is being held accountable to a standard that works for the consumers of Nevada? And right now, I don't think we live in that world. I would love to. It would be awesome if we did, but I don't think we do.
Hey, Jacob, Cam, I really appreciate you being on CityCast Las Vegas today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, please go tell a friend. You could also rate the show, give us those stars, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget, you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.
The only thing I would add is that energy bill prices are raising at twice the rate of inflation, right? So it's at 10% now. So we're paying 10% more now than we have before. In the next 5 years, they're going to be 32% higher. So I think that's worth noting that these bills are only going to get higher for Nevadans unless, there's some changes.